I've always liked to isolate myself from time to time. Something about staying away from everything and everyone brought me a peace that the city could never provide. That's why I decided to rent that cabin in the middle of nowhere for a quiet weekend. The place was isolated but perfect, a small wooden cabin surrounded only by snow and tall trees. I was really excited about the idea of disconnecting from the rush and just relaxing. On the first night, everything was perfect. The silence was absolute, and the view from the window, with the snow falling slowly, seemed to have come out of a movie. But peace began to break on the second night, when I woke up at dawn to go to the bathroom. When I left the room, I noticed something strange. The wooden chair on the balcony, which I was sure I had left in a corner, was slightly away from the original position. My heart raced for a moment, but I thought it was some kind of deception, maybe the wind. I went back to my room and tried to ignore it, but the feeling of discomfort didn't leave me all night. The next morning, I tried to forget what happened. After all, it was just a chair, right? But when I went out to get some fresh air, my stomach turned. Around the hut, in the snow, there were footprints. Many footprints. The problem was that it didn't make sense. They were around the cabin, but they didn't indicate where they went or where they came from. It seemed that someone or something had gone around the house, but without leaving the place. There were no marks of a straight walk or even footprints going towards the forest. The footprints spread randomly, as if someone had made circles around the entire cabin. I went to the edge of the land, but I saw nothing but the vastness of the snow. I was already starting to feel uncomfortable, so I decided to leave earlier than I planned. I hurriedly packed my things and started to leave the cabin, but before leaving, I looked again through the balcony window. The chair was still there, slightly away, and that made me realize how insane all that looked. How could someone have entered without leaving any sign of presence, but left footprints around the whole cabin? The wind couldn't have done that, not with the snow intact and without movement. I decided that, anyway, I would get out of there as soon as possible. When I finished packing my things, the weight on my chest didn't decrease. I looked at the cabin door once more before closing it and realized that, even with everything locked, there was something strange in the air. An absolute silence. Not the kind of silence that is expected in a remote place, but something more oppressive, as if the environment itself were waiting for something. Already on the road, my cell phone vibrated with a notification. It was a message from the host, saying that he had forgotten to mention a detail about the place. The house was built on a plot of land with a curious history. Some people report strange sensations at night, but no big deal. I didn't know if that made me calmer or more terrified. I looked out the car window, and for a moment, I thought something was moving quickly between the trees, as if following me. I sighed and accelerated, trying to drive away the feeling of being watched. Now, I can only think of that chair and the footprints around the cabin. How is it possible that no one left traces on the ground, but something was there? And who would have done that? Maybe I was getting paranoid, but something in those seconds seemed completely out of place, as if there was a presence that no one wanted me to notice. I still wonder, was I just a victim of my own imagination, or was there really someone or something there? And you, have you ever had the feeling of being observed in an isolated place? Or did something happen on a trip that left you with an inexplicable fear? Tell me in the comments. I want to know what you think. I never believed in horror stories, but what I lived that night made me rethink everything. My friend Marcos and I decided to camp in a rural area, far from everything. The idea was to have a quiet weekend, away from the noise of the city and distractions. We rented a plot of land near a lake, set up our tent, and spent the day relaxing. It was the peace we were looking for. Everything seemed perfect until the night came and silence took over the environment. We were trying to sleep when, in the middle of the night, we were awakened by a distant scream. At first, I thought it was just some animal, maybe a wolf or something like that, but soon the feeling of discomfort began to grow. The scream seemed human. Something like a cry for help, desperate. Marcos and I exchanged a quick look and, without thinking twice, we took our flashlights and decided to go see if someone was really in need of help. As we walked, the sound became clearer, but suddenly it repeated itself, coming from behind us, near the tent. We ran back to the tent, the flashlights shaking in our hands. The scream seemed closer now, more urgent, but at the same time, it seemed like it was following us. When we arrived, we found something that left us completely speechless. The camp was turned upside down. Our backpacks, which we had carefully organized, were open, as if someone had searched everything. But there was no one. The sound of the scream was still echoing through the forest, but the silence soon took over again, and it was this silence that scared us the most. We stayed there, paralyzed for a moment, trying to understand what was happening. How could no one have gotten there without us noticing? And who or what would have turned our things upside down? The strangest thing is that there were no traces of anyone. No footprint on the ground, no trace that someone had passed by. I felt that something was watching us, that we were not alone. The weight of silence was oppressive, and fear spread through our bodies like a palpable sensation. That feeling of being watched intensified every second. Every crash in the forest, every slight ran of the leaves, it seemed that something was approaching, waiting for the right moment to act. We were paralyzed with fear. We couldn't decide whether we should run or stay, and try to understand what was happening. I looked at my friend, and he was with the same expression of dread stamped on his face, as if trying to convince himself that there was nothing there. But, at the same time, he could not ignore the feeling that something was wrong. We decided not to waste any more time. Without exchanging a word, we began to keep what was left of our things in a hurry, as if every movement was a race against time. The noise of the wind in the trees now seemed louder, more threatening. When we finished packing everything and got ready to leave, we heard the scream again, closer than ever, almost as if it were coming from inside our own tent. It was such an agonizing sound, so desperate, that it made the legs wobble and the hearts shoot. There was no longer any doubt. Something or someone was outside, waiting to catch us. We didn't need anything else. The adrenaline took over us, and in an almost instinctive movement, we ran to the road. The lanterns barely illuminated the path, and the forest seemed to swallow the sound of our steps. The scream echoed again, this time so close that it almost seemed to be accompanying us. But when we looked back, there was no one. Whatever it was, he was watching us, but he didn't show himself. Finally, we got to the road. Without hesitation, we got into the first car that passed by, asking for a ride, and we didn't look back once. In the days that followed, we tried to understand what really happened. But no matter how hard we tried, we couldn't find answers. What would have caused those screams? Who turned our things over? And the most terrifying thing, who or what was behind us in those hours of despair? Now, just thinking about that moment, I feel the same chill down my spine. If you've ever had a similar experience, or if you think you know what was happening that night, tell me in the comments. I really want to know what you think about it. I went to make a delivery in a neighborhood that I didn't know well. One of those remote areas, poorly lit and half forgotten by the city. When I saw the address, I thought, that doesn't look good, but work is work, right? I got there around 10 p.m. The house was old, with that appearance that gives chills just by looking at it. There was only one window on the upper floor, and even so, it gave the feeling that that house was empty. I stayed there for a few seconds, just listening to the silence. But then, something strange happened. I started to hear muffled voices, as if several people were talking inside the house, but no one showed up. I thought it could be something ordinary, like a party or something like that. So, I decided to knock on the door. What I didn't expect was what would happen next. The man who opened the door looked confused, as if he was sleeping or distracted. He looked at me for a few seconds and asked who had made the order, as if he didn't know anything. I was silent, looking at him, because the voices were still there. Even with him at the door, I could perfectly hear a murmur, as if the conversations were happening right behind him. The tension in the air was palpable. When I mentioned that there were people talking inside, the man became even stranger. He vehemently denied that there was anyone else with him in the house. And the moment he said that, the voices stopped abruptly, as if someone had given a command. The silence was so heavy that it made me shiver from head to toe. He simply smiled, that forced smile, and closed the door slowly, without saying another word. I stayed there, stopped for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. The feeling of discomfort was so strong that my body seemed to stick to the place. I didn't know what to do, if I should insist or just leave, but something told me to leave as soon as possible. I can't explain, but there was something wrong in that house, and I already knew that the worst was to come. I decided to turn around and start walking back to my bike, but before I could take the first step, something made me stop. I couldn't see what it was, but I had the clear feeling that I was being watched. It wasn't just that man's look. It was something else. Something strange. As I moved away from the house, I still heard the muffled sound of voices, but now they were different. They seemed more hurried, as if they were arguing or talking in a low tone, but neither of them overlapped the other. It was a mixture of murmurs that made me want to run even more. When I looked back, I saw a shadow passing quickly through the lit window. I didn't know if he was watching me, or if it was something, or someone inside the house. I didn't want to look back anymore. Fear took over me in a way I had never felt before. I just accelerated my pace, ran to the bike, and left without looking back, with my heart beating hard in my chest. I never told that to anyone. To this day, I always wonder what really happened that night. I ended up at a gas station on the road, trying to process what happened, but the fear didn't leave me for long. The house was there, behind me, with its shadows and voices that still echoed in my mind. I don't know if anyone else had an experience like mine, or if it was just something in my head. But what I know is that night, something strange happened, and to this day I can't understand what it was. Something was not right in that house, and the fact that the man closed the door so slowly, as if he knew I was leaving, left me with the feeling that he was waiting for something. Now, I ask you, have you been through something similar? Something that doesn't make sense, but that was engraved in memory? If so, tell me in the comments. I want to know what you think about it. Am I the one who's crazy, or was something supernatural really happening there?